Hi, this is just a short video on Assessment 1 for COM549 Corporate Culture, Stakeholder and Change Communication. So let's get started. I'm going to do an overview of the 3 assessment items just so you can get yourself organised for the subject. So the first assessment is due on the 2nd of August and it's really focused on your organisational culture, okay, and doing an analysis of that. The second one is due after the session break on the 13th of September, so you'll have 2 weeks during the session to actually get this done. And that's a stakeholder analysis, and you'll have a case study of an organisation. And then the third one is due on the 11th of October, and it's really about the challenges facing professional communicators in today's world of globalisation and significant changes and disruption. So let's get started. This first one is really an organisational culture analysis. I prefer to move away from the word corporate. We don't always work in corporations. A lot of us work in organisations, we work in community, etc. So, it's due on the 2nd of August. The value is 30%. The word limit is 3,000. So just to give you a heads up about the word limit. I sometimes are a little bit more lenient, but once I get to 3,500 words, I will stop reading. So be really cognizant of keeping to be the brevity and succinctness of what you write about, and try and stick to that 3,000 word limit. And it can be 2,000 to 3,000 words. Yeah, look, that's a pretty generous amount of words. Please submit as a Word document, not as a PDF. It's really nearly impossible for me to mark PDFs. I can only kind of give you comments, and I like to be able to mark you on your grammar and your spelling and other things as well, and it's much easier for me to do that in text for you. So the tasks. So you are required to write a report. So it's going to be a report, and we'll talk about the report format. And this will demonstrate your understanding of the role of communication culture in an organisation in which you work or which you are familiar with. You are to discuss the following points. You're to provide a definition of corporate culture and how this relates to your chosen organisation. Now, all of this information is going to be in Module 1, which is focused just on organisational culture. So this is where you'll find the information, and it's important that you look more widely as well. So consider who is responsible for the culture and how it is communicated to the stakeholders involved. For example, is this through government regulation, industry codes of practice, or through organisational values? So discuss the positives and negatives of the specific corporate culture or the organisational culture. So the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses, and propose strategies that could enhance, manage or change the culture for the better. So we're looking at strategies that are going to make it better in some ways. And this is a big ask for you to identify those strategies. So I don't expect you to go into those in details, but I need for you to give me an overview of some of the ways that you would go about enhancing or managing or changing the culture. Some of the communicative practices that you would use, and Module 1 will have those as well. So in relation to the above, provide reason why communicators should be involved in the assessment and discharge of those responsibilities. So why as professional communicators, and why is communication important in this? So reinforce your report by appropriate imagery, so you can put in pictures or whatever, and relevant quotations in the form of APA referencing. So you can draw some quotes out of some of the literature that you read. It's really important that you read more widely than the subject, that you compare and contrast different literature to actually critically analyse that literature. And so paraphrasing and summarising and comparing and contrasting is really important. You have to submit a full bibliography. Now, I normally ask for a reference list. If you put a bibliography in, that means that some of the things in there have been referenced and some of them haven't. I would like a reference list, okay, of all the things that you refer to. and then you can actually include other references in a bibliography. So the presentation of your report. So the executive summary is the first thing you need to do. So in that you provide a succinct overview of the corporate culture in your organisation, the positive and negatives, and propose strategies for changing the culture. So this is really an overview of what you've written about. What's the purpose of this report? What are your key findings, and what are your recommendations? Okay? A table of contents, sections to headings that follow the tasks. Okay? A bibliography or reference list. For some of you, this is your first postgraduate subject, so I've provided a link to that below, so there'll be a link to the reference list. The marking criteria, and we'll go over that. So make sure you write to the marking criteria, and I will talk about that in a minute. General comments. The references and contents pages are not included in the word count for this assessment. Also, I do not include any appendices as well. So if you put appendices in, I don't include that in the word count either. And if you're really struggling with the word count, sometimes I don't include the executive summary as well. I won't review draft assessments prior to submitting for this assessment. However, if you are unsure of the topic, please make sure you review the online meeting recording and/or email me. So it's easier if you have it in writing. So it's easier if you actually email me with your ideas, because I like to see them in writing and then I can respond to you. It's really important also that you start to use the assessment forum, so you might want to post your question to the assessment forum as well. So I will provide individual feedback on your assessment against the marking criteria, as well as outlining areas for you to improve on for your next assessment. Okay? I might also give you advice to actually contact an academic learning and literacy advisor, because you may need some extra report with your academic writing. Don't take that as an offence. Don't take that as a negative. It's just for you to get support and assistance so that you can achieve in this subject and in your course. So please drop me an email if you have any concerns or something happens that prevents you from meeting the assessment deadline. Now, it's really important that you do that, and you do that quickly, so that we can resolve that in session and before the assessment's due. If you do not email me before the assessment deadline, then I cannot grant you an extension. Okay? You need to email me with a reasonable reason why, and you have to look at the special consideration information to see what reasonable is. So illness is reasonable, and normally you need to attach medical certificates, illness for yourself or illness in the family. I suppose if your computer completely crashes, that could be an excuse. However, don't try that excuse too many times. Work deadlines, things like that aren't really normally reasonable excuses unless you get some sort of a statutory declaration or something from your employer. I try to be as reasonable as possible. However, if I do grant an extension, it'd normally be not more than 7 days. And also granting extensions, it's really interesting. You need to actually identify the equity in this too with other students. So we're all struggling. I'm busy. Students are busy. We've all got deadlines to meet. So it's really important that we all try and meet those deadlines as well. Okay? So get in early if you realise there's going to be an issue. The other thing is too, if you're on holidays, that's not an excuse for granting an extension either. So look at the special considerations criteria. Email me before the assessment's due. If you don't, you won't get an extension unless it's extenuating circumstances. Obviously, if you're ill or your children are ill, or your partner's ill, that's really that's fine. Okay. Now, the marking criteria. Always look at the marking criteria so that you make sure that you cover this off, because this is what I marked too. So there's there's 4 criteria for this thing. The first one is the clarity of the assessment of corporate culture principles. So this is your definition that you do. Okay, the definition of terms, the intent, the summary, and the recommendation. So this will be, I will find most of this in your executive summary. So where we say you get a high distinction or a distinction, it's where you actually have a high level of critical analysis. You have a clear argument, sustained logical and consistent reasoning. Okay, so you really have to critically engage. You have to have different sources of literature, and then working down to a credit if it's a sound analysis, a pass if your analysis is just descriptive. Okay, long description is just a description, not really analysis. If you don't attempt the pass, or you don't do any analysis at all, that's a fail. The next criteria was demonstrated understanding and critical evaluation of differing corporate culture theories and practices. So this is where you really need to look at a lot of different literature and compare and contrast, okay? And really look at that, the different arguments. And so look all the way down there about the actual criteria for that as well. So if you only use the subject readings, you'll probably only get a credit. You really need to use more than the subject readings. You need to research more widely. Demonstrated understanding of the role of communication in assessing corporate culture. So this is really the role of communication, or the role of the communicator in assessing and managing and communicating for cultural change. Okay, so this is where you'll demonstrate a high level of understanding of the role of communication. For a distinction, a better than average understanding. For a credit, you just demonstrate that there is some understanding. For a pass, there's limited understanding, and for a fail, there's no evidence of understanding, which I'm not expecting from any of you. And then finally, the logical argument and critical evaluation of sources. So this is where your referencing comes in as well. As communicators and doing a Master of Communication, it is really expected that your arguments will be logical, that you will use topic sentences, that your grammar will be correct, that to get a high distinction or a distinction there will be no typographical errors, and that your APA referencing is accurate and consistent. So that means get in early, have a look at the APA referencing guide, make sure when you put quotes in that you include page numbers for quotes. All of those things, look at those, make sure that they're correct, because to get a distinction or a high distinction, they need to be. Okay. Also, make sure that your grammar is accurate, that you have paragraphs that start with topic sentences. Each new sentence isn't a new paragraph, and each page isn't a whole paragraph either. So be cognizant of your paragraph and sentence structures. So that's all. If you have any questions about anything, please do not hesitate to email me in the first instance, or you can telephone me. My consultancy days are Mondays between 10 and 12 and Thursdays between 3 and 5. The last Thursday in July and the first in August I'm not available for consultation. If you have any questions about assessment though, post them to the assessment discussion forum first, because quite often your peers will respond to those. I will respond to them, and that will be for the benefit of your peers as well. So they get to actually see the response that they probably wanted to ask the question for as well. Okay, so good luck with assessment 1. As I said, it's due on the 2nd of August. Get in early now, start preparing for it. Okay, I wish you luck. Cheers.